Obviously, trauma and people dealing with pain and overcoming pain has been my life's passion. You're working on a documentary right now about that. So fascinating. You're going into prisons and tell us about that.
Is a younger woman, she's early 30s. She's in for 21 years for felony murder. She was living a decent life, and then she had a sexual trauma. And what happened was she was dating a guy or hanging around a guy. They went on a drug rip.
The simple financial, like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Why am I concerned about this financial thing when I'm way past that?
That's right.
But that was a generational trauma I got. Nothing compared to your dad's in prison or your mom's murdered, your mom's a prostitute.
But my father died by suicide. And for many, many years, I was sort of ashamed about that. And I just felt I couldn't reconcile that in my brain. I didn't understand it. But then someone said to me, you can never compare how you feel and what you've been through to what someone else, because we all carry it differently. I always felt very blessed. You know, I always felt like angels were carrying me along, and I always want to be thankful for my blessings. But it is okay to say, yeah, there has been some trauma in my life. I came across an amazing woman, and she said to me, the more that you understand your worth and you can build your business, the more people you are going to be able to help, because you'll be able to expand. You'll be able to hire more people. And so you have to understand that you are worth making money. So when I had to negotiate my own deals, I was like, oh, I was timid in the beginning. And then something switched in me.
You grew.
I grew.
Who's your mentor in business? I'm curious.
I think the reason that I had the chutzpah is because I had so many great mentors. I had beautiful women around me. Christy Paul, who became a very famous anchor on CNN, she was one of my earliest mentors. So I remember I was about 16 years old, and I happened to be watching some political coverage. At the time, I saw a woman come on TV, and she was just, in my mind, you know, when you're 16, you look at everyone as like, wow, she's a grown-up. She's so well-spoken. She's beautiful. I was like, that's what I want to do. And so, honestly, I made a plan.
Welcome to Bending Over Backwards with James Adkins. I'm your host, Dr. James Adkins, where each week we take a deep dive into what it takes to break through barriers and change the game, whether that's in medicine, business, or life. I'm sitting here today with Carrie Pena. Thank you for being here today. You have accomplished a lot. I think everyone in this town knows your name. You're very famous in the community. But I also know that you've transitioned and you started a company and Inspired Media 360, and that you're making you're also making documentaries now. And I got to meet you through my wife through the Heart Ball, because you're involved in charity. So thanks for being here today. But share with us what you're doing. You know, what your background.
Thank you so much for welcoming me into your studio, and congratulations on the podcast.
Thanks.
That's awesome that you're reaching out outside the medical community and having conversations. So as you kindly stated there, I have had a good run in broadcast journalism based here in the Valley. I was the main anchor for 3TV for many years and have worked here and nationally. And a few years back, I really wanted to take a deeper dive into long form journalism, and also just in the content creation space where I could share more inspirational stories. It's sort of the rest of the story, right? Like a lot of times in journalism, we're telling a story. And as you know, in medicine, right? You have to go in, you're doing a surgery, but there's a lot that happens after that, right? The emotional aspects. So I was always intrigued at the resilience of human nature and human beings and what we can all accomplish despite the circumstances sometimes that we are placed in. I love that kind of storytelling. And that's how I started my company, Inspired Media 360. And it's been very successful. People seem to respond really well to that kind of journalism.
How long have you had your company Inspired?
About 5 years. And now I have 2 production studios, and I run a studio that I also was the co-founder of the Center for Positive Media. We have a big soundstage there. So we do live productions there. So we do a multitude of journalism and live productions. We can do satellite live. So we basically have expanded into all areas of media.
Okay, very cool. And one thing we were talking offline before we started today, obviously trauma and people dealing with pain and overcoming pain has been my life's passion. And I know that you're working on a documentary right now about that. So fascinating. You're going into prisons and you're Tell us about that. That's fascinating.
Thank you so much for asking about that. So the documentary short is called Blank Canvas, Reimagining Corrections. It started where I teamed up with my former co-anchor from the news, Brandon Lee, who has since left news, and he's now running what's called Art of Our Soul. It's trauma healing through art therapy and different modalities. And Brandon was brought in to build out an art therapy studio inside Perryville Prison, which is the women's prison. So Banner Health leaned into this, and they underwrote a series of stories that we were producing. Well, when we were inside the prison doing these stories, we realized, wow, this is deep. Because if you really sit down and talk to people about where their life takes a turn, right? And what happened. And
just like that.
Just like that. And I truly believe that most people are good people. Not all.
Too.
But I think most people who come up against really difficult circumstances, and it's how we're able to navigate. So we profiled 2 women inside the prison. And one of them is a younger woman. She's 30, early 30s. She's in for 21 years for felony murder. So she was living a decent life. She said she had good parents. She actually had a scholarship to Juilliard. And then she had a sexual trauma that happened to her. And she said that derailed her life. And she started hanging around the wrong people. She got involved with some bad characters. And what happened was she was dating a guy or hanging around a guy. They went on a drug rip. And it was a small batch of marijuana or whatever that looked like. And the 2 guys involved, they shot at each other. They killed each other. Well, she was there, so she was charged with felony murder. That's 21 years that she ended up. She served half that sentence, and we profiled her in this
just
documentary.
Being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep.
Could have been one moment in your life, wrong place, wrong time, and then now you're in prison for 2 decades of your life.
And she has 2 children.
Oh wow! So three lives get damaged, not just one.
Yes, and so we try to tear back to ask the audience. I mean, when I tell a story like this, I'm not here to try to convince anyone that I want you to feel sorry for anyone. I just want to say, as a society, do we want to have empathy? Do we want to have compassion? But beyond that, do we want to look for solutions? Because there is a lot of generational trauma.
Sure is.
And I think that we need to examine that. And if we have a society that says there is a certain degree that we want to be forgiving to one another as human beings to try to help each other heal, and if so, how do we lean into that? And from a practical standpoint, with regards to Perryville Prison, 93% of those women will be getting out. So even if you're someone that you're like, look, I don't really care about, that's not my jam, it's not interesting to me, but from a taxpayer perspective, from a safety perspective,
good investment.
Yeah.
And generational trauma, you think about, I think I have a better understanding of that. Our pastor talks about that, generational trauma, and the Bible talks about that. It's real.
It's real.
I think about my grandparents that age, and I think about what trauma did I get from my grandparents? Well, they had the trauma of going through the war and the poverty.
Yes.
And so I left that, some of that got through to me. And even after I'd become wildly successful, I'm still worried about like the simple financial, like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Why am I concerned about this financial thing when I'm way past that?
That's right.
But that was a generational trauma I got. Nothing compared to your dad's in prison or your mom's murdered, your mom's a prostitute, your parents are addicts. People, you don't get to choose your parents.
Right. And trauma is trauma.
It's real. Your brain registers it real even after it's over.
That's right. Yeah. Someone told me when I was younger, so my father passed away, and I don't speak about this publicly very often, but my father died by suicide. And for many, many years, I was sort of ashamed about that, and I just felt that I couldn't reconcile that in my brain. I didn't understand it. Well, I've since learned that there's nothing to be ashamed of there.
Exactly.
And when I was younger, I thought, I have a good life, and it's nothing compared to this, and this. But then someone said to me, you can never compare how you feel and what you've been through to what someone else, because we all carry it differently.
So
right?
true. That is so true. We have a tendency to look at that, and maybe you were that way of like, how should I feel sorry for myself? Look how bad they have it.
Yes. And I have a good
that
life.
may not be healthy.
Yeah.
You may be, right?
Yes. I always felt very blessed. I always felt like angels were carrying me along. And I know to some people that sounds a little woo-woo, but I
Not to
truly
me.
believe that.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like, I want to lean into that gratitude, and I always want to be thankful for my blessings. But as an adult now, and having done the sort of journalism that I do, I also realize it is okay to say, yeah, there has been some trauma in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't have to suppress that it's okay to talk about that, and then I don't have to be ashamed about it.
So true. I had a physician on here a few days ago, and we were talking about the depression in medicine and physicians, and you would never talk about that. Male especially.
Because it seems like weakness.
Yeah, a weakness. You would never say, hey man, I went to a therapist. And guess what? I've been to counseling with my wife, and it's very healthy, and I'm glad I went. It made me a better human being. But I don't think in the past people would talk about that, especially men.
Yeah.
And admitting that trauma has shaped you, and it runs a movie in your mind.
Yes.
Even when you're right.
Yes.
When your conscious mind is not working, your subconscious is running that movie, and sometimes that trauma pops up in inopportune times.
I think the fact that even just you doing this podcast and more people are leaning into this space, and my family is in the medical field as well. I'm on my dad's side. My grandfather's a heart doctor, and my family went to Northwestern and very successful. And
are you from Chicago?
Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was born. I grew up in Los Angeles, but yes. So but that level of intense, rigorous pressure. And even for me in the broadcast journalism field, there's a lot of perfectionism, and, you're on TV, and you have to be able to withstand criticism. And part of that I think is good, but we don't have to be perfect all the time. And we can go through moments where, okay, I don't feel great. Or I am trying to.
I have those every day.
And even at your level of success,
Yeah.
like you don't have to be perfect all the time. You can't.
Yeah, it's so true. And young, I've got a young daughter now, and I think about the beauty industry and these magazines and the pressure on young women. You're a woman entrepreneur. I mean, it's harder.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here, and because I have a daughter. She's softened my heart. I have a little 5-year-old daughter, Georgiana. But share with us a little bit about that, because as a female entrepreneur, the game's different too.
For sure. Yes. That's actually a really good question, and I appreciate you asking that. So that's one of the things that I'm most proud of in stepping into the entrepreneurial space, because as a news anchor, I was fairly guarded because I had agents, lawyers. I was protected. I wasn't really, for me personally, I wasn't really a skilled business person, right? I was on the air.
You weren't trained that way.
I wasn't trained that way. I didn't go to business
On-air
school.
personality,
I didn't negotiate my contracts. So when I wanted to start Inspired Media 360, I did it because of a love of journalism, but not because of a knowledge of business. And those two things are different.
Yes.
But it has been a really great experience. Scary at sometimes. And my husband's a lawyer, and sometimes people say, oh, your husband funded this, and no, he did not. I did all that. I mean, I've leaned on him for advice at times, but I did it all myself because I kept telling myself, in the moments where I felt like, do you have what it takes, right? Can you go into this boardroom full of 12 men and negotiate a deal? Or 12 shrewd women who are, familiar with business.
There's
and
some sharp business
there's
women.
some incredible business women who have mentored me. And one of the things that I found along the way was that I'm a very philanthropic person. So one of the things that was hard for me was stepping into the ownership that what I'm worth.
So true.
And being
asking
able to
for what you're worth
and stop being afraid, because in the beginning I was volunteering a lot of, and my husband, who, you go to see a lawyer and they're like, hey, you're going to talk to me? This is how much it's going to cost you to come and talk to me. Meantime, I'm writing out entire plans for people. Here's a content plan. Here's what you need to do. He's like, you just consulted for them. Right.
Yeah.
And so it took me a little while, but then I came across an amazing woman, and she said to me, the more that you understand your worth and you can build your business, the more people you are going to be able to help.
True.
because you'll be able to expand. You'll be able to hire more people. And so you have to understand that you are worth making money. Now, in the news, I did make very good money, and 3TV was amazing to me, but that was all negotiated by other people, not by me.
Yeah.
So when I had to negotiate my own deals, I was like, I was timid in the beginning, you know? And then something switched in me.
But you grew.
I grew. Yeah. And we've had a very successful run.
What kind of confidence did that give you? Because you, I mean, come on. You're a confident woman. You've been on the media. You've been around. But overcoming things like that, you know, being able to walk in a room and say, no, you're going to have to pay me.
Yeah. It gave me, you know, I have a daughter as well. And, you know, I want, and so your daughter, I love that name, by the way, Georgiana.
Georgiana.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Thank you. What's your daughter's name?
London.
London. Oh, from England.
Yes.
My wife's British.
Yes, I know. Yeah. And so it gave me a lot of confidence because I realized my time is valuable. And if I'm going to take time away from my children, because I also am a full-time mom and I care about that. Yeah. And I like to talk to a lot of women in particular. I know this is tough for men too, because obviously you're a great dad and it's hard. We want to, you know, be there and be present.
Thank you.
But what is it worth in terms of
time, time away from your family and
time is our most precious resource. I think that is what I've learned through all of it. That if someone is going to ask me for my time, well, what is it worth? And maybe it is something that I just want to lean into and I want to volunteer. And I do a lot of that. But I also have learned that business is business, and you can do business in a way that is also nice. Yeah. You know, and so not mistaking kindness for weakness is one of the lessons that I learned along the way as a woman.
Sounds like you picked it up.
Yeah.
Now, as far as mentors, because you said you had a mentor in business. Who's your mentor in business? I'm curious.
Wow, I will tell you, and that's such a beautiful question. I think the reason that I had the chutzpah, if you will, to step into the entrepreneurial space the way I did is because I had so many great mentors. So coming up in the news business, which can be a cutthroat business at times, just as medicine or anything else, I think that's worth doing. Real estate, anything you look at, right, that's worth doing can be cutthroat. I had beautiful women around me. And I mean beautiful not just from a beauty standpoint, I mean kind. Yeah. So Christy Paul, who became a very famous anchor on CNN, she was one of my earliest mentors. Lynn Sue Cooney, who's really well known here in the Valley. Well, she's just women who wanted to see me succeed. Faye Fredericks, who became a big sister to me. She's now the main anchor over on ABC 15. Just women who supported me and said, yeah, go do it. And they weren't jealous. And so I think that I sort of blocked out the rest. I learned to just do my own thing, right? And to lean in and do the best job I could and not worry about what was happening if anyone else was advancing faster than me. Sure. Because the women around me were supportive. Sure.
Where you can't control things out of your purview. Worrying about those things is a waste of time.
It is a waste of time.
So you're in California. Take me along the pathway.
Yeah.
Did you get recruited to a TV station in Arizona? Is that how you got to Arizona?
So I went to ASU, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Communications, one of the best in the country. Yeah. And my family at the time was like, "Where are you going, Arizona? What's that all about?"
So you knew you wanted to be in TV
when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
Because I grew up in Los Angeles, so I was in sort of the industry, if you will. A lot of my friends were going into, you know, acting, singing, modeling, etc. And I loved all of that. But I felt like I wanted something a little bit more, for me, just a little bit more dimensional. I mean, those are hard industries, and acting is really hard. It is tough.
This is harder than I thought.
Right. You know, podcast. But for me, I was just searching for where I knew, and my grandfather wanted me to become a doctor. Well, you either have that in you or you don't. I'm like, nobody wants me operating on them because trust me on that. So math and science was not my strong point, but I loved journalism. I love writing. I love communications. I was always entering speech contests. I liked being on stage. So I remember I was about 16 years old and I happened to be watching some political coverage. And at the time, I saw a woman come on TV, and she was just, in my mind, you know, when you're 16, you look at everyone as like, wow, she's a grown-up. She's so well-spoken. She's beautiful. I was like, that's what I want to do. And so, honestly, I made a plan.
Wow.
I was like, this is, and I tell young folks who come to me, I say, look, you need to have a plan. You can have a dream, which is great, but you also need a plan.
Yeah.
And so I made a plan and so I researched the schools around the country that I thought had hands-on training, and I ended up going to ASU, and then I interned at 3TV.
Okay. So
and I sort of snuck on the air.
Snuck on the air.
Because I was always there. I was always the intern that was like there if somebody needed me. So if they were short someone, I was like, oh, I'm here. I could do it.
So you were available.
I was available. I would intern. I interned at 3 a.m. for that Good Morning Arizona. And then I would go to school after my internship, and I would go to school all day long. And then I had a job after that because I helped like also support myself through college. And then I'd go do my homework, and I just wanted it.
Yeah, you wanted it.
I wanted it.
That's so interesting. I mean, that crosses all spectrums. You know, when I used to tell young physicians when I would interview them I'd say there's 3 A's when it comes to a physician. You have to be affable, you have to be available, and you have to have a certain aptitude. And as embarrassing as it is for me to say this, the aptitude is probably the least important. And even in medicine, you know, there's you have to be available. You have to want to be there for your patients.
Yes.
You have to have a kindness.
Yes.
To want to, you know,
Yes.
at least in our space, and availability. Not everybody wants to show up every day, do they? That's one of the. If you think about success in your life, it's getting out of bed and showing up, isn't it?
That is to me. So one of the things that happened to me along the way when you talk about business stuff. So you asked, and I love the questions you're asking me. I had a lot of great women mentors, but I've also been around really spectacular men. I've had great co-anchors, very supportive, and one of the guys that I ended up following along with, I don't know him personally, but I loved his book, is David Goggins.
Oh, yeah.
It's very different than what I'm usually like Brene Brown and everybody's
you're very
like
feminine for a Goggins type of person.
I listened to that. I think it's You Can't Hurt Me.
Great book.
I loved that book, and something about it. And he says that you have to, at some point, to be truly successful, you have to have a calloused mind. Well, that's very much opposite of how I think, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not a hard edge.
Yeah.
But there was something wise in that I will work harder than anyone. And so it doesn't mean that I'm the smartest journalist. It doesn't mean that I know everything in every business meeting, but I will work harder.
Yeah.
And I'm very good at communicating in business, and I find that that's something that people have really appreciated.
It's brilliant. If you can outwork people, and you're a great communicator, you're going to be successful.
Yes.
And I think those are great attributes. You know, you can outwork people.
Yes.
Especially in today's society. And I love that you referenced Goggins. I read both of his books, and talk about somebody who had trauma.
Yes.
I mean, the trauma he went through we won't have to get into it, but horrendous, right? Beyond and what he's done and how he's turned that into a positive.
And so, you know, my kids keep asking about reading it. There's a lot of expletives in his book, so I don't want them reading it. Yeah. But it was very funny because when I was reading his book, I would drop them off at school, and I was like, mental mindset. Yeah. They're like, oh gosh, mom is on this crazy mental mindset thing, but I'm a big believer in that. Well, one day, I'm driving and I'm in line to drop them off, and I look down at my phone and I see he has pinged me or something, not direct message, but like he commented on a post.
Okay.
And I show my son and I'm like, hey, David Goggins. I think he wrote stay hard or something. That's one of his lines, stay hard. Yeah. So I showed him. So then ever since then, they've been like, wow, mom's like really kind of she's really like, but I think that mental mindset, I try to,
so true.
You know, and there's so much pressure on the kids now to be, you know, my kids go to very good schools, and in Arizona, we're lucky. There is a lot of school choice. Yeah. And but you look at Goggins' background, and he has that scene in his book where he says he had to look in the mirror. He was like 300 pounds. Yeah. He was, you know, desperately depressed and hated himself. Yeah. And he ended up having that moment in the book where he looked in the mirror and he's like, the only person that's going to be able to change this is you. Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to rescue you.
No one's going to pour you a warm, soapy bath and save you.
That to me helps people, because when we're out there, I just don't subscribe to victimhood. I know I'm not putting down anyone who's going through a tough time, but the sooner that we can get ourselves out of that victim and feeling sorry for ourselves and say, how do I take this and turn it into something powerful? That to me is transformative in life.
Wow. That's passion coming from you. I can tell you're living that.
I believe it.
Yeah, it's so true. And you do physical exercise is part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
In order to callous your mind and make your mind stronger, you have to do something.
Yes.
What do you do?
So mind, body, spirit. I'm a big believer in that. And maybe not every day. I mean, I love to exercise. I'd love to go to the gym and exercise 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, but time doesn't permit that. Yeah. So I try to, just like so many working moms out there, you try to navigate that. So what I've done is I try to look at how can I fulfill one of those things every day. So if it's not physical activity, I mean, I'm always on the move, so there's some physical activity there. Then I do my meditations every single morning without fail. So I set that sort of gratitude mindset. And I really do that every single day. I'm really careful about what I eat because I think that really plays a part in how much energy.
Yeah, you can't win without energy.
You have to have energy. And that to me is also a winning part of business. You can feel when someone comes into a room, if they have down energy or if they have up energy, if they're authentic, if they're not, you know what I mean? You can feel those things.
You can.
So I really try to eat as healthy as possible. I'd love to say that we only eat fresh food and this, I mean, not all the time, but we do 80%, I think, really good eating. And then I do love to exercise. And I also love community. So I think one of the things to me is being in touch with people that we care about. If you and your beautiful wife reached out to me, and I try to read all my messages. People have asked me, they're like, really, for real, I really try to reply. I mean, I love your wife. So anyways, when I see her come up, so when you asked me to come on the podcast, it's like, you know what? You can make time for things you want to make time for. End of story.
True. And you're right. It takes energy. You have to eat clean. You have to have the spiritual part of your life. And you have to have exercise.
Yes.
If you're not strong mentally, you're not going to be a successful female entrepreneur. You're not going to succeed in business because it's hard.
I mean, I watched some of your podcasts. I saw you get up at 4:30. I aspire to that. I can't sit and tell your audience I'm there. I'm at like the 5:30 mark. But optimizing the hours in the day. But I find that if you truly look at it that way, you can accomplish so much.
There's a lot of time during the day if you're not distracted.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's where I'm careful about not wasting time. So if you want to have a phone call, I'd love to have a valuable conversation or talk to my friends, but I don't subscribe to wasting time. So I'm careful about just scrolling
Calling
around.
somebody, hey, how you doing? Just I'm bored. I'm driving.
I don't do that. When I'm driving, I like to just listen to some cool music or just really like take some quiet time. Cool. I really try to make good use of my time. Yeah. And I also have made a point, and my friends who, if they see this, will tell you that my new thing is with my dear friends, because I have so many really good friends, I've stopped. I was really bad about just texting and just text. And I was like, I actually want to hear people's voice sometime too. Yeah. So we scheduled time to talk.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can lose that human touch.
You can lose that human touch.
People need to be talked to, that's for sure. So calming down your nervous system, you're probably reading about that in the media, right?
Yeah.
Activating your parasympathetic nervous system to shut off your sympathetic nervous system. So you do that with meditation. That's a big one for you, and exercise.
Yes.
Okay. And have you ever, last question for you. Have you tried any of the cold plunge stuff?
I'm into all this. I love all of this. And I just did the ice bath challenge with my kids. Okay. So I go to the red light sauna. Okay. All right. I do a lot of those types of things. I try not to, I kind of want to document it online, but I'm a little hesitant, and I'll just be really transparent. I don't ever want it to seem like it's fancy people stuff. True. Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
So I try to take people inside the journey, but without acting like everybody has access to this, because they don't. So I'm sort of torn. my team always wants me to show some of these things,
Sure.
and I like to show it.
Yeah.
I don't want to take
Cold
for
showers
granted.
aren't expensive.
No, but I love the cold plunge,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I've worked with a lot of great people in the holistic field over the years. Like
Sure.
Robert Kogadell's a good friend of mine. He runs
Okay.
AccuHealth. His big thing is like get outside early in the morning, put your feet on the ground, like actually on the earth.
Yeah.
He's all into the cold plunge. He's
Yeah.
taught me a lot of great techniques,
Yeah.
and we've done a lot of reporting in that space.
It's good for you. I mean, our nervous systems are amped up all the time.
Yes.
Anything we can do to kind of dampen things down and calm down, and breathing.
The breathing techniques has helped. The box breathing is
the
really.
box breathing. So I'm so glad that's in the media, because I use that.
I use that all
the
the time.
It's effective.
Well, one of the things that I learned that I think was a very valuable tool in the type of media that I did was a lot of live news. And when you're thrown into 5 hours of breaking news, and
Yeah.
sometimes we're covering a terrorist attack, or you're seeing horrible things like unfolding right in front of you, you have to be able to control your
Yeah,
anxiety,
of course.
your nervousness. So the box breathing helped me. And also, and this might be helpful to some of your women listening, I used to have a very high voice. And so that made me seem sort of girlish and, all these things. I had a coach along the way, and she said, listen to me. You don't have to change your look to conform with what other people think is what a news anchor should look like. But what you do need to do is get control of your breathing and your voice. And she said,
What a powerful message.
it was really powerful, and that helped me become much more commanding on the air, and I think in person, because I could just show up as my true self, and I like having, all the things.
The late night FM radio.
Totally.
I forgot. There's a guy named Voss. Have you heard of him? Voss is a FBI. I'll get off on a tangent here real quick. He wrote a book called Never Split. This is for a businesswoman. Don't Split the Difference. Never Split the Difference. He's an FBI negotiator. And you should pick up his book, A Little Unsolicited
I want to see
Advice.
that, yeah.
And he talks about talking in the FM late night television radio station because it calms people down.
It does. Well, and I coach selectively. I do some coaching. I actually really enjoy it to coach, especially for women who are, I've coached some women, they're bosses, like they're amazing, but they get nervous in front of crowds, or they haven't really learned how to control their voice. And then you're second guessing yourself, right? And so then you can't be as effective in your communication.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's coming to mind right now, a woman I know who's incredibly intelligent, but her voice.
Yes.
Her voice, it discredits her.
Correct.
It completely it sounds terrible, but
that is something that you can change, for the most part.
and that's not your appearance, like you said. You're not saying you're just changing your voice, lowering your voice.
And sometimes slowing down. So one of the things that I found is that people feel they need to fill in every gap. And we don't.
Yes.
Silence is okay sometimes. Pausing and thinking of what you want to say.
I need you as a coach. Carrie.
Well, you're a great communicator.
Kind.
It's just we're in a rushed culture. And on TV, a lot of times, too, you feel, oh, there's dead air, this. But really, sometimes it's more powerful to just stop and sort of take in, and then you can sort of understand too what someone else is trying to relay to you, and you can respond more effectively.
I see why you're so good at your job.
Thank you.
That's good stuff. Thanks for sharing that with me. So how would people find you, Carrie? Everyone in town knows you, but if anyone's hearing this, wants to take a look at your documentary.
Oh,
wants
so
to find
nice.
it,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that is live on YouTube. We debuted it at a theater. We had a really great response. So I really appreciate your interest in my work. I really do. I have a lot of gratitude for folks like you who are following along.
Thanks.
And we are on YouTube, so you can go to our Inspired Media 360 YouTube page. It's also Blank Canvas Doc, DOC, so it's a short documentary. It's 50 minutes. And then they can find me, Carrie Pena on, I don't know, anywhere.
You're everywhere.
You just Google it and I'm there.
I really appreciate you coming today. Really kind of you and taking time for us. I hope today's episode helps you stand taller in your own shoes. If you're a female, if you're anyone and you want to learn from someone, Carrie Pena, you're just lovely talking to you today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for all you're doing too.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks,
you.
James.
All right. Well, give me feedback. Always, feel free to give me feedback.